What about our relationship with China? Do you think that what's going on in Venezuela, given Chinese support, could potentially throw a wrench in anything from our trade negotiations to our overall relationship with China?
I think that's a great question. The Chinese are usually pretty cautious and risk averse about this. So there were reports that the Chinese were helping shut down social media and public broadcasting. Probably true. The Chinese are mostly interested in about protecting their investments here, which are in the over 50 billion that they put in the country. I don't think they're willing to put a lot at risk in Venezuela in comparison to what the relationship with the United States. So I think at the end of the day, if it's the balance of what they're negotiating with the United States, that is going to be much more important to them than whether Maduro stays or leaves.
And what kind of negotiations, Jim, with Russia? I'm told by some people inside the Beltway that one thing the Russians are hoping to get out of this, say, we'll leave Venezuela if you keep your hands off Ukraine or something like that. Is there? Have you heard of any kind of negotiations like that going on right now?
Yeah. No. Here's what I heard. After the Mueller report came out, the U.S. quietly went to the Russians and they said, okay, look, all this is behind us now. We have an opportunity to reset the relationship. And the Russians basically stiff-armed them. The Russians said no. And not only did the Russians say no, now they have turned around and essentially they poked a finger in Trump's eye in Venezuela. So I think that the likelihood of a deal with the Russians or a reproach bump with the Russians, it is deader than dead.
Okay, there appears, again, this is live action you're watching in Caracas. Actually, it was just moments ago, but there appears to be more activity as the sun is going down there in Caracas. We will continue on this shot and let you know what's happening. Go ahead.
Hey, Jim, anytime I hear about the Russians and the U.S. with conflicting goals in a part of the world where they don't have soldiers on the ground, it makes me worried that there could be an escalation in violence where neither of those two players pays any local cost.
By the way, which you're seeing right now, that's what the crowd was cheering about. There was a Molotov cocktail that hit its mark. They're trying to put out the fire on top of the vehicle. Go ahead.
So I'm wondering, what do you think the chances are that you have a changing government here that can happen relatively peacefully without a big escalation in violence?
Well, I think we already have violence and we're going to have that. And I think it's going to be serious. The question is at the end, who's standing, Maduro or Guaido? I think to the U.S. credit, the U.S. worked really hard at a peaceful solution. And what they did is they built this very strong off-ramp for Maduro. So on the one hand, they continue to drive pressure on the regime. But at the other, they said, dude, you can leave this country anytime you want, take your money, take your kids, and you will be fine. And because the U.S. knew that was the only way to get anything resembling a good outcome and a peaceful transition of power. And even at this late point, the United States continues to tell the senior officials in the Maduro regime, if you leave this country, we'll facilitate that. Because if they flip, Maduro's either going to get arrested, they're going to get killed, or they're going to flee the country with nothing.
Yeah, we should mention, by the way, already about 10% of the population has left the country, going to Colombia, other parts of South America, and of course the United States as well. And capital has left the country. Jim, you were talking a moment ago about how they're going to rebuild and how desperate the situation is. If Maduro leaves and if there's a semblance of some kind of responsible government, a lot of that capital is going to be coming right back in.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't be, I think that's true. We shouldn't be too Pollyannish. I mean, part of the problem, part of the reason why Maduro has been able to hang on is he has embedded himself very deeply with the criminal networks. And the reason why the sanctions haven't really, forced him is because it's not the oil money that's keeping him in business. It's the payoffs from the criminals. The criminal networks aren't going anywhere. So you're going to have the devastated country, the massive poverty. You're going to have the existing criminal network and corruption that you're still going to have to deal with. And you've got over 1 million of your population not living in the country, and they're going to want to come back. They're not going to want to stay in Colombia forever. And you're going to have to bring them back and integrate them. So we shouldn't be too Pollyannish, but we have to remember, if you look at after World War II, nothing like the devastation that we saw in Western Europe. And look at how quickly, even before the Marshall Plan was put in place, how quickly things recovered. And this is nothing like the challenges faced.